Hello, everybody. Dark as hell, isn't it? So I was shut the video, and because of the time of day and the clouds coming in, as you can see over here, it's still light out, but the clouds are here in Massachusetts, and you can't see anything. So let's put a little light on the subject. At least you can see me, or maybe you don't. Anyway, the lights are gonna be on. Here's part 4 and the final part of the SEC prediction series. We're talking about Tennessee, Texas, Texas A&M, and Vanderbilt. Full recap schedule, game by game for each one of these schools, plus a full recap of the standings and who's going to the SEC championship game. And I have to admit something. I did these schools one at a time and based upon situations. I didn't say, well, because of this, I need to change. No, I just went game by game by game. Did the situations. And let the chips fall where they may. Not because of this can't happen, this. No. What happens, happens. This is my sink or swim. And I realized something. I created a controversy. And what I thought was going to happen didn't. And oh boy, am I going to hear about it. All right. And one of the ones I'm going to hear about is the one right off the jump here. We're talking about the Tennessee Vols. My Vols. Oh boy, here we go. Vols 9-4 last year. They shut out Iowa in the Citrus Bowl. Vegas has got their win total at 9.5. Josh Heupel 27-12 in 3 years at Tennessee. We're entering year 4. Joe Milton is gone. He's now throwing bombs, literally, in New England with the Patriots. A couple of them are ridiculous, but that's Joe. Can he get the touch? But anyway, the Nico Iamaleava era has begun. I was one of the few people who wasn't completely impressed with his game against Iowa because, yeah, he ran around a lot and he played passing, but it wasn't enough for me. And sorry, I'm using Hendon Hooker as a benchmark. That game wasn't enough for me. Some fans it was. I want to see more. So, that being said, how well is he going to be in his his first full year as a starter? Because he played in the bowl game last year, but because he had played played the 4-game role, he got the red shirt. So he's a red shirt freshman starter this year. The running back room lost a lot of talent. Dylan Sampson's back. Besides him, everybody else can produce. There is issues with there and there, how well they can do. Biggest concern of the entire thing, completely honest, brand new secondary. All 5 starters are new. They basically, everybody hit the portal. That was news. The secondaries are a complete rebuild. How well are they gonna do? It's a legitimate concern for me. All right. So we get started on this. Then I'll choke to death first. All right. Game 1. Home against UT Chattanooga. Yeah, that's a dub. Then next game is a neutral site game in Charlotte against NC State. If you watch the ACC prediction videos, you know I have them Vols beating NC State. Home against Kent State, MAC school. They're going to get the win there. On the road at Oklahoma. Just covered this in part 3. The Vols are going to travel to Norman and lose. Then they go to the bye. Out of the bye, they come on the road again at Arkansas. That was covered in part 1. You win that game. Home against Florida the next game. Also covered in part 1. You win that game. Then home again against Alabama, also in part 1. You're losing that game. My Vols lose it. So they're 5-2 coming into their second bye. Here's the next final 5-game run. Home against Kentucky, covered in part 2. That's a win. Home against Mississippi State. That was in part 2. That's a win. On the road at Georgia. That was covered in part 2. That's a big L. That I don't think they got the horses to compete. I'll be fully honest. If they beat Georgia, it's one of the upsets of the year. They're going to be a good team, but for me, psychologically, they're not on Georgia's level. But I'm saying that on the road in Athens, they're losing to Georgia. Home against UTEP, the next game. They're going to get the win there. On the road at Vandy. Yes, Vandy, the same Vandy they beat by 24 at home last year. Margin of victory may be bigger, maybe less. I don't know. But I have them beating Vandy to finish 9-3, 5-3 in conference. Next up, the Texas Longhorns, also another newcomer to the SEC from the Big 12. 12-2 last year in the Big 12. They lost to Washington in the college football playoff semifinal. Vegas has got their win total at 10.5. I forgot to write down the win total here for Sark's record, but the main thing is the fact is has he turned the corner as a head coach? So people say, oh, yes, he has. Has he? He was at Washington, was okay. He was at USC, there was problems. He's at Texas. Is Texas' success due to Sark's coaching or to Sark's recruiting or Texas's recruiting? Question needs to be asked. Yeah. Needless to say, Texas only plays one game this year, the same as it played yesterday, the Red River Shootout. We're going to get into that. Wide receiver room, can it be just as good as it was last year? We're going to see about that. Defensively, because of losses to the NFL, are they going to take a step back against the run? Because they were damn dominant against the run. But also the fact is you lost players, and SEC running backs are different than Big 12 running backs. I'm sorry. I know Big 12 fans are going to take offense to it, but it's a more physical game down here, and you get beat up. We're going to see how Texas handles it. The biggest concern I have is not really the run blocking, is the secondary. They had some transfers that are coming in I do have some questions about. I'm wondering, could the secondary potentially develop to be an issue in the season, especially in the latter half? So, shall we get into this? All right. First off, game one home against Colorado State. That's a dub. On the road at Michigan. This was covered in the Big Ten predictions. That's a dub. Home against University of Texas San Antonio, UTSA. That's a win. Home against Louisiana Monroe, ULM. That's a win. Home against Mississippi State. This was covered in part 2 of the SEC predictions. That's a win. Then you get the bye. Out of the bye, at home, 4th out of 5 consecutive road games against Oklahoma. I mean, not home game against Oklahoma. It's a neutral site game in Dallas, the Cotton Bowl, Red River Shootout. You're beating Oklahoma, as I covered this in the last video, part 3. Home against Georgia, cover this in part 2. You're unfortunately getting the L. I think Georgia says a little bit more than you do. On the road at Vandy. Really? You're beating Vandy. They got not a win there. Next, you have the bye. Come out of the bye at home against Florida, covered in part 1. That's a win. On the road at Arkansas, covered in part 1. That's a win. Home against Kentucky, covered in part 2. That's a win. And then the game we have not had since 2011. Texas A&M. College football realignment took this away from us. But it's back, and it's in College Station. You're on the road. Whether A&M wants to admit this or not, this is their Super Bowl. This is the game that they want more than anything else. Oh, no, we're not. Shut up. You're worried about this game. This is the game you're worried about. All the rumors going around that A&M is going to leave because they don't want to be in the same conference as Texas. And as I've said, Alabama and Auburn fans have said, look, we've been at each other's throats for the whole time we play against each other. And Alabama and Auburn says, and Alabama acts as much entitled as Texas does. The big difference is Texas and Oklahoma were big fishes. Okay, so you're a big fish against Georgia? Against Bama? Against LSU? Should I keep going? Because there's a lot more brands I can name that can beat up Texas. They're not the top dogs, brand-wise. They're not as much as they think they are. Now, but anyway, getting back to the game at hand. Excuse me. On the road, this is their game of the year. You just played Kentucky, Arkansas, Florida. Looking at A&M, they've been having bad years. They're out of here. I honestly think because new head coach, your staff's established, you have the better quarterback. You have the better talent. And Texas is guilty of mailing it in the past. And you know what? You're mailing it in against A&M Because I think you're going to overlook them. Last game of the year, you're going to overlook them. And I think you're losing to A&M on the road in College Station. They win their Super Bowl. It's going to piss a Longhorn fans off, but I'm standing by what I do. Texas finishes 10-2, 6-2 in conference. Next up, OG, the Texas A&M Aggies. Literally just did this. 7-6 last year, lost to Oklahoma State in the Texas Bowl. Mike Elko comes in from Duke after 2 phenomenal years there. Look, here's one thing nobody can dispute. Duke, Vandy, Stanford, Northwestern, those 4 are pretty much, I think, academically, probably the 4 hardest football schools to get into that are on the power level. Maybe throw a couple more in there. So, regardless if you want to throw more schools in, everybody can agree with this. Your requirements to get an athlete in are a lot easier, it should be a lot harder to get an athlete in than they are at other schools. That's the key to this. Now, that being said, Mike Elko won more games in 2 years at Duke, 16, than A&M won the same period in the SEC, 12. Now, they didn't play an SEC schedule. No, you didn't have SECs at academics or talent either. Look what they did. So, is it the James Franklin Vandy issue? But Vandy? No. If he would have stayed there for 4 more years and kept it going, I would have probably put him in the same breath. But it's still an incredible feat that should not be underestimated. But anyway, you have a new staff coming in, new terminology, possibly new verbiage, everything else going on. New place. How well is everybody going to gel? Players and coaches. How well is this going to go? We're going to find out about this. First question. Can Connor Wegman be a good to great starting SEC quarterback? That's an issue. We need to find out the answer to it. The pass protection for this team has to be better than last year's. Because otherwise, every single game day, Connor Wegman is going to have turf added to his diet every single game. He's going to be eating the grass. This has got to get fixed. And the secondary got almost a complete overhaul. How well can everybody there work together? Because this is like Portal. This is just gut job. This is going to be interesting how well that plays. All right, so now, starting off, we got Week 1 schedule at home against Notre Dame. Hell of a way to start your era. And the built-in sub-story. Former Duke head coach Mike Elko facing his former starting quarterback, Riley Leonard. This is going to be interesting. Normally, I do my normal checklist here, and I just came down to this. Okay, with the problems that Notre Dame that Texas A&M has, who has the better talent? And I started looking at maybe a slight edge to Notre Dame, but Texas A&M is at home. That cancels that out. So I went through all the advantages here. Coaching. Okay, Elko's a good coach, but he's not in terminology with the players. First game, so it's not going to be as keyed in as it normally would be. So he's not going to be as good of a head coach. Established staff at Notre Dame. And then I came down, okay, the tie break. Use the same tie break when I talked about Nebraska and Colorado. I said that game. Can Dylan Raiola outdo Shedeur Sanders? No, he couldn't. Can Connor Wegman outplay Riley Leonard? No. I'm picking Notre Dame to go into College Station and beat A&M. Then you go at home again, next game against McNeese State. This game, that's a dub. What are we kidding here? Then you're on the road at Florida. Cover this in part 1. You're going to go down to Gainesville and catch an L, which you're not going to be happy with. You're 1-2 to start the year. Not a great way to start the Elko era. Then you're home against Bowling Green. That's a win. Home against Arkansas. This is covered in part 1. That's a win. Home against Missouri. This was covered in part 3. You're losing that game at home to Missouri. Then you get the bye. Come out of the bye at Mississippi State. This was covered in part 2. You're getting the win there. Home against LSU, also covered in part 2. You're losing that game. On the road at South Carolina. This was covered in part 3. You're getting the win there. Then you get your last bye. You're home against New Mexico State out of the bye. This has got a school that has a new staff. New everything. You're beating New Mexico State. Then you're on the road at Auburn. This was covered in part 1. You're winning that game. And home against Texas, your Super Bowl. Literally just talked about it. You're beating Texas in your game of the year. So you finish 8-4, 5-3 in conference. And last and least, Vandy. Vandy finished 2-10 last year. They got their biggest win totals 2.5. I forgot to mention A&M's win total was listed as 6.5. Excuse me. 2-10 last year. Head coach Clark Lee, 9-27 in 3 years at Vandy. Is he on the hot seat? If they have half a brain, no, he's not. Look, this is his first ever head coaching gig. Prior to this, he was the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. What talent is he working with, and what conference are you in? Not everybody's James Franklin. Okay? Give him time. Don't fire him. It'd be stupid to do so. Now, I just talked about New Mexico State against Texas A&M. Well, new staff, new head coach. Their offensive coordinator, Tim Beck, left. He's now the OC at Vandy. So you got his new scheme coming in, his philosophy. How well is that going to translate? But he didn't come alone. If you watched New Mexico State last year when they were bowling, they got a playmaking quarterback named Diego Pavia, who followed Beck from New Mexico State to Vandy. So you know he's talented and smart. He's a playmaker. Can he get the starting job? Because if it's going to be a battle between him and Utah transfer Nate Johnson. But considering Beck's the OC, I think I'm knowing which way he's going to lean. But Clark Lee will have the final say, I'm sure. Wide receiver and offensive line rooms got complete rebuilds. How well is everybody going to work there? That's going to be an issue. Defensively, Clark Lee, before he became defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, was a defensive backs coach. So I have no problems with the secondary, and it's actually developing. Linebackers, they're all right. They make the plays. But defensively, if they're going to have any chance to do anything in any games, there has to be some kind of a pass rush. And here is a legitimate question that normally with every other school in the SEC, you already know the answer. But it's a question here. Are there enough athletes on the defensive line for there to be a pass rush for Vanderbilt? That's a legit question. All right, now let's go with Vanderbilt's schedule, shall we? You're starting off at home against Virginia Tech. I cover this in the ACC predictions. Myself, along with a lot of other people, are high on Virginia Tech. You're losing that game at home, Vandy. Then you're on home again against Alcorn State. You're getting the win there. Then you're on the road at Georgia State. The only one of your non-cons that you're on the road for, and Knoxville to Atlanta is not that far. You got conference games that are further away. So I'm having you go on the road and beat Georgia State on the road. Then you're on the road at Missouri. It's covered in part 3. You're losing that game. You come out of the bye, which is the following week, and then you're at home against Alabama. Yeah, that's an L. Cover that in part 1. On the road at Kentucky. This was part 2. That's an L. Home against Ball State, your last non-conference opponent. I have you beating Ball State. Then it gets bad. Home against Texas, that's an L. At Auburn, that's an L. Home against South Carolina, that's an L. There's a bye. At LSU, that's an L. Covered all these before. In Tennessee, I literally just covered. That's an L. So you're 3-9, 0-8 in conference. You're picked to go 2-5, so you beat the spread according to my predictions. So there's that. So now, full recap of the standings. Oh boy. All right. Worst in the SEC. Vanderbilt. Stunner, right? 3-9, 0-8 in conference. 2 schools finished 4-8, 1-7. Arkansas and South Carolina. 3 schools finished 2-6 in conference. 2 5-7, which is Florida and Mississippi State. The other one was Auburn, who finished 6-6, 2-6 in conference. Everybody else is bowl eligible. 2 schools finished 4-4 in conference, 8-4 overall. That's Kentucky and Oklahoma. 3 schools finished 5-3 in conference. 1 was 8-4. That's Texas A&M. The other 2 were Missouri and Tennessee. Georgia, finished 12-0, 8-0 in conference. 4 schools tied with 10-2, 6-2 in conference. Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas. Who's playing Georgia in the SEC title game? Now, I do this game by game. I don't go like, well, wait a minute, he's losing to this, and no, they have to do this, and they would do this, and no, they got to do this, and this on there because this team's got to make the title. No. Game by game. Situation by situation. I don't change it for politics. Or for a favorite team. Or for a team that should be in. It goes as it goes. So 4 teams tied. Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas. Well, you look at the schedule. Texas didn't play Alabama, LSU, or Ole Miss. They're out. Alabama and Ole Miss both played LSU. LSU played them both. And when I looked at the schedule, both games are at LSU. And I have LSU winning both. That's going to piss some people off. So it's Georgia, LSU in the SEC title game. Georgia winning to become the SEC champion. Okay. I'm saying this again about the college football playoff, the 12-team playoff. Let's say this real fast, though. You honestly think that they're going to have a 3-team team get in? Here's my prediction recap real quick. Teams 2 losses or less in the power conferences. First off, 1 G school already getting in, so you're down to 11 berths. ACC 1, Florida State. Big 10, 4. Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, and USC. That makes 5. Big 12 has 2. That's Oklahoma State and Utah. That makes 7. And you have 5 here in the SEC. Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas. That's 13. There is no way that a 3-loss team is going to make this playoff. They wouldn't let 2-loss teams in the last one. They're not going to let 3-loss wins in this one, unless, of course, that 3rd loss is in a conference championship game. We may see that when we go to 14 teams. But in the 12-team era, there's no way in hell that a 13 3-loss team is going to get into the playoff. But, yeah, folks, little foreshadowing later on. I still got to figure out the playoff. So, we got a lot to talk about, don't we? So, and a lot to be yelled at, I'm sure. So let me know what you think about all of this and yell at me for all in the comments. So thanks everybody for watching. Haven't done already, do me a favor. Smash the like button, hit the thumbs up. It helps the algorithm, helps the video be seen by more people. Comment on the video, and oh boy, am I going to hear it in the comments section on this one. Let me have it. I already know what's coming from a lot of them. We'll see what's going to happen. Share the video if you want to. If you haven't done it already, if you haven't subscribed already to the channel, thank you for doing so. If you haven't, check out some of the other videos I've done. If you like them, hey, subscribe to the channel. On the way to 700 subscribers, slowly but surely on the way to 1,000 to make some things happen. Sorry about that. Still getting over this. You want to follow me on X, the link will be in the description. So the SEC is completed. Tomorrow's going to be the first subscriber roll call predictions. And that's going to be Middle Tennessee State, Notre Dame, Toledo, and Wisconsin Whitewater from Division 3. Those are the subscriber schools that did not have their school in the subscriber rankings. You've seen the roll call videos who weren't members of the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, the ACC, the American, the Mountain West, the Pac-12, or the Sun Belt. You're the Conference USA or the MAC or Notre Dame or FCS in Division 3. You'll be done in this part. So part 1 of the roll call predictions will be done tomorrow. So thanks everybody for watching. Hope everybody's having a great day. I hope you'll listen to me in the dark, and I'm sure I'm going to be getting yelled at to the point that you're going to wish I am in the dark. So I hit my damn hazards instead of hitting the lights back on. Nice job. So thanks everybody for watching. Hope everybody's having a great day, a great evening. Be safe out there, and please be good to each other.